This episode is brought to you by Microsoft Azure. Turn your ideas into reality with an Azure free account. Get everything you need to develop apps across cloud and hybrid environments, scale workloads, create cloud-connected mobile experiences, and so much more. Discover what you can create with popular services free for 12 months. Learn more at azure.com. That's AZURE.com. And sign up for a free account to start building in the cloud today.
Hello, Duke fans. DBR Bites, episode number 57. Here for you, a potpourri of different topics we're going to be getting to. I am Jason Evans. I'll be hosting. I'll be shepherding us through the wilderness on this episode. Joining me is my good buddy, Donald Wine. Donald, it is just a couple minutes after 9 p.m. on Sunday night. What have you been up to today?
I've been watching a lot of soccer in person. There was a doubleheader here at Audi Field, so I had some friends in town. I've been kind of playing guest all weekend, but this weekend, just to bring people up to speed, I have gone to an Orioles game, which of course, shout out David Rubenstein. He's the new owner there. I have gone to a Mystics game. Shout out Elena Beard, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame with the Mystics. I also got a bobblehead. Shout out to the class of OQuad 2004.
Wait. You got an Elena Beard bobblehead?
I got an Atlantic Beard bobblehead. You can see it right here.
Nice.
Very, very cool. I actually got
awesome.
two. One's going to my godson, but I have one for myself. And that was very, very cool. It's my first Mystics game in the entertainment and sports arena. Very, very nice arena. Mo Curry was there. I didn't get a chance to link up with them, but it was great to see two Dukies in the building. And then we had the doubleheader for soccer today. So it's been a very, very eventful weekend for me, and just a lot of people in town.
Wow.
And I'm going to the Nets game tomorrow, so I'm just going to complete the long weekend with another game.
Dude, I tossed that question. I had no idea what was going to come of it, and you just hit it out of the park. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a fun weekend. I can't complain.
So the other thing we did this weekend was we tallied up the results of the contest that Donald and I had, the draft, the half-decade draft, where we picked various Dukies from the past 5 years and tried to put together the best team. And there were people who had opinions on the DBR boards, on the forums. There were people who sent us emails. After all of it was tallied together, it looks like it's pretty much a tie.
Yeah. I tabulated one. It was at first it was 7-6 me, but then there was one Scott Rich kind of went in your favor, but he said, I want to hold out, hope and maybe change my vote. He didn't change his vote, so I'm considering that a Jason vote. That makes it 7-7. But Jason, as you kind of mentioned when we did the draft, it was an offensive versus defense kind of tally there. And as I mentioned, there were two very stark teams with two great differences. And it was more about what you preferred as a fan, right? So some people preferred, hey, they said, hey, my favorite team, my players on one of these teams, or hey, defensively, Jason's team matched up, or hey, Jason can guard the paint all he wants. Donald's team's going to shoot from three. Like there was a lot of great opinions there, but we thank everybody for chiming in on the boards and via our email.
Yeah, and I will also say that a couple of people noted, and I agreed with them, that I made a very tactical mistake. That after you took two big men, you didn't really have room for another big man, and I drafted Mark Williams. Mark Williams was the best player on the board. There's no question about it.
Yes.
But a lot of folks said Jason should have taken Jared McCain in that spot where he took Mark Williams. It would have given me that offensive balance, that spacing that maybe my team lacks with Wendell Moore and Trey Jones as my best outside shooters. Maybe I needed a little bit of spacing. So I will admit to I think if I had drafted Jared McCain, I think you would have then picked up Mark Williams, but I think that I still would have had Derek Lively down the line. I think.
Right. Or you would have had your pick of Matthew Hurt or Derek Lively. That's essentially what you would have ended up with. So,
right.
I thought it was a good exercise because, we talked about all the players that were, left on in the draft room, in the green room, right?
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of guys that we just didn't even mention that we could have picked. And again, that's not to take from the very, the what would we call the picks, the futuristic, the warm picks, right? The Justin Robinsons
Right.
of the world, where we're like, yes, this is the guy that we'd love to have on our team for just 10 games. We didn't think even beyond that, but we definitely considered all of it.
Yeah, and again, our thanks to Steve Van Dude, who sent us the idea for that. Really good idea. It ended up being a fun exercise. Good interaction from everybody. Remember, you can always email us, give us ideas, tell us what you think about what we're doing. dbrpodcast@gmail.com. That is how you reach us. All right, but now let's get to the topics. Let's get to the real stuff that we're doing here today. And topic number one is something that I'm going to go ahead and say it, Donald. You and I knew about this a little while ago, and we couldn't say anything. We were very polite. We wanted the team to break the news. Bobby Hurley returning to Durham to play in an exhibition game on October 27th against Arizona State against the Duke Blue Devils, a charity exhibition. And yes, Donald, you and I have known about this for about a month, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, he's coming back to coach. If he comes in and puts on a jersey, I'm going to lose my mind. It would be amazing.
Right.
And if soccer, we have testimonial matches. If he wants to come back and suit him up, that's great.
If he wants to suit up, John Shire needs to also suit up.
He also needs to suit up. There's a lot of guys who would come back for that game, and a lot of guys who could probably suit up. It would be great. But I think that's not the point of this game. It would be the two guys, the two teams that are preparing for the season. But yes, Jason, I mean, I found out about this 2 months ago and told you about it. And then you started hearing stuff on your end about it, how close it was to being finalized. And like you said, we don't necessarily like to break news on here. We like to wait for the team to announce things because it's their story in a way. And this story of, Bobby Hurley returning to Durham to coach for the first time. Right. He's been a coach for a long time, and this is the first time he will have returned to the Gothic Wonderland to coach. I think it's a really cool thing. I also like that, it's a charity exhibition, and we've talked about how this was going to work. I think the reason why when the non-conference schedule came out, this wasn't on it is because they were trying to, cross every T and dot every I with regards to the NCAA and all the rules that may be associated with these charity exhibitions. And then also, Jason, it's a way for us to, give praise due to Bobby Hurley, right? Like the legend that he is, the career that he had at Duke. This is the game where we don't have to root against him, right? Like it's an exhibition game. Everyone can go home happy. It doesn't count. And we know that Duke doesn't like to, schedule games against teams with coaches that are a part of the brotherhood. We just don't like doing that, and unless it's in the tournament that happens, but we're not trying to actively schedule that. And I think the great thing is he gets to come back and get his flowers that he deserves in front of, hopefully a sold out crowd. It's not a part of the main ticket, season ticket allocation, but there's going to be tickets. All this is going to be great, raised for a good cause. I believe it's Duke hospitals that are going to be benefiting from this. So this is a great deal. Everyone wins in this situation. And again, it should be a fun weekend. And that's the weekend. Also, it's October 27th, October 26th is when Duke football will be hosting SMU. So great time to get to Durham.
Yeah, 100%. And it is worth noting, if folks have not paid attention to the record book, Bobby Hurley is still today some, 32 years after he graduated from college. Bobby Hurley is still the NCAA's career assist leader. If you're putting together the list of the greatest point guards in NCAA basketball history, Bobby Hurley is on the list. He's one of the guys that you're absolutely considering. And it's just wonderful that Duke is going to get a chance to honor him and honor what he's done as a coach, a very, very successful coach at Arizona State. And the other thing I love about it is that Bobby Hurley, by doing this, Duke is going to get a real exhibition game. We're going to really get before the games count, we're going to get a real look at what this Duke team can do. And I think that's and they are going to get a look at, at how they stack up against another Power 5 conference team. Usually these exhibitions, they're not real tests. And this is going to be a real test. I haven't heard a television partner announced. I'm sure it's going to be televised. Mm-hmm. But obviously a lot of people are going to want to get back to Cameron to see it in person, not just televised.
And I don't know. So a couple things. I don't know like the rules on whether those can be televised, like if Fox or ESPN or whatever comes in as a partner. I think that is something that is in the works. And if it is on a big channel like that, then it's probably going to be ESPN or maybe even Fox. But Jason, one thing about Arizona State, do you know that Duke and Arizona State have only played once ever?
Really?
Once. 2009 is when they did. November 25th, 2009. It was at Madison Square Garden. Duke won 64-53. Obviously, that was before Bobby Hurley took over as coach.
Yes.
But of course, yes. John Shire was in his senior season at Duke. He had 16 points and 6 assists in that game while also grabbing 4 rebounds. So I think that was pretty cool. But I think also, Jason, I wonder if this is going to replace the quote unquote secret scrimmage that we've had against teams the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it has to. Yes.
Yeah. I think it has to. But again, I don't know the specifics behind that because this is the first time that we have had one of these public charity exhibitions, and whether it replaces that secret scrimmage that we've seen over the last couple of years remains to be seen. But I do like the fact that they are testing themselves in the preseason.
And it's worth noting, it may be easy to say, oh, the secret scrimmage and the exhibition, same kind of thing. Because look, we played teams like Houston and Villanova in these secret scrimmages. I think there's a difference. There's a difference playing in front of a crowd. There's a difference playing a real game, because those secret scrimmages, they stop play a lot and they set up different scenarios and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My bet is this is going to be a straight 40 minutes of basketball playing, the closest thing to a real game that you can. There may be a little more free substitution and stuff like that. You may see teams going a little bit deeper in their bench because they're not as concerned about wins and losses. But playing in front of a crowd in that kind of atmosphere, especially for a team like Duke that does have some youngsters who are going to be acclimating to what it's like to be at this level, to be playing in front of this kind of attention, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think we're playing Lincoln, PA in the exhibition game the weekend before, so you get your cupcake, so to speak, exhibition where you get to work out some of the logistics of in combinations and things like that. But yes, this is going to be different than those scrimmages where it will be a 40-minute game. There will be referees. There will be a crowd, TV timeouts, and they're going to go through the motions of it being that first game, which is going to be at that point, a week away from the first, opening part of the regular season. So I'm really excited about this. I know, Jason, we've been kind of, holding our excitement, about this because we've known about it for so long and known that it was in the works and really hoping that it got across the finish line. So we were really, really, really jazzed up to see that, that email officially announcing that this game was going to happen, and it's going to be great. I'm trying to get down for that game, for that whole weekend, really. It's going to be a fun weekend. There's going to be a lot of things going on. But yeah, I'm really, really excited for it.
Oh, I would be there for sure. Unfortunately, one of my best friends' daughters is getting married, and I've got to be at the wedding, and it's just it won't work out. Even with it being on Sunday, it's just too difficult. But this is a scheduling thing, by the way. In terms of the Duke schedule, this sort of fills out the Duke schedule. We now know everything except for the ACC, dates. We know who we're going to be playing and things like that. But related to scheduling, we got some news about the women this week that connects to the men a little bit. Tell folks a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the Ball Dogs Classic, it's a classic that is taking place November 25th to 27th in Las Vegas, and the Duke women are going to be a part of it, which I think is very, very cool. Duke is going to be taking on Kansas State in the semifinal of the 4-team tournament on November 25th. On the other side, you have DePaul and Oklahoma, and then the winners will meet in the championship on November 27th. Now, of course, you may already have some plans to go to Vegas because at around the same time on November 26th, the Duke men will be playing Kansas in Vegas at the T-Mobile Center. This is at the Lee's Family Forum, which is a smaller venue, but it's going to be great to have both teams in Vegas at the same time. That allows for fans to kind of have 2 days, 3 days of basketball if they really wish. And again, this is a game that I'm trying to get out for, but I think it's a really, really cool thing for not just the Duke women to be playing Kansas State and playing DePaul, Oklahoma. Those are 3 teams that I don't necessarily know enough about their women's program, but those names definitely make people interested. On its face, you could talk about how Oklahoma's been very good in the last few years. That I can tell you, but I think having that kind of prestige and being in one of these classics with, 4 teams that are brand names, I think is great for this program and gives them a chance to really show that what they can do. And remember, they are going to be playing South Carolina in that ACC SEC challenge on the women's side, which is a really big test. So
Big
this is
matchup.
going to be a way for them to get ready for that. But also, I think also lining that up with the men who already have that stature. Duke, Kansas, and Vegas needs no, hype up. But to have the women with them as well, I think is really, really cool. It props both programs up. It makes both programs prominent. And I think a lot of fans that are going to be out for one game will get to stick around for the other. And I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, exactly. My big takeaway on all this is I would hope and expect that you will see way, way, way more Duke fans than Oklahoma and DePaul and Kansas State fans, because folks, we got a reason already to be in Vegas. And so all of you out there who are initially planning to go to the Duke Kansas game, just stretch your trip a little bit. Come on, a couple extra days. No one ever had a bad time with a couple extra days in Vegas, right, Donald?
Never. Just 48 hours, or I'm sorry, 72 hours. Don't go longer than that. Jason, you and I know that nothing bad, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. and nothing good happens after 72 hours in Vegas. But I will say this, Jason, about Duke's team, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the women's team as we move forward, but Toby Fournier, we talked about her in the spring.
Slam dunk, baby.
She can dunk. And literally, she's a freshman, and when they had their freshman night at Cameron, Kara Lawson brought out Toby Fournier and said, "Hey, there has been no woman who has ever dunked in Cameron Indoor Stadium." And she said, this girl right here is going to be the first this year, so you might want to check her out. This is going to be a fun season with her, Jaden Donovan, and some of the other players who are just absolutely dynamite. This team is on the rise, and again, I'm looking forward to watching them play on its own. And the fact that both teams are gonna be in Vegas, just sign me up, put me in a hotel, give me some tickets, let's go.
I love it. Hey, speaking of Vegas, I wanted to mention something else very quickly, and this is a callback. We talked about this on an episode, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 months ago. There's this Anna. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we talked about it because I think at the time we thought that Duke might be involved in it. We are no longer involved in it, but there is some implication as you're about to explain.
Yeah, exactly. This is the NIL tournament. They're calling it the Players Era Festival Tournament. And it's a tournament where the organizers say they're going to give $1 million to the NIL collective of each team that's playing to be distributed to the players. Now, they were very clear that they weren't paying the players for appearing in the tournament, that the players would have to, do various appearances, sponsorship kind of things. But the $1 million per team was going to go to each of the teams that signed up for this tournament, even though the players were not being paid to play. The teams that signed up: Alabama, Houston, Creighton, San Diego State, Texas A&M, Rutgers, Notre Dame, and Oregon. That's a pretty darn good lineup. I mean, Alabama and Houston in everybody's top fives. Creighton, San Diego State, those teams are ranked in the top 20. And Texas A&M, Rutgers, Notre Dame, Oregon, not slouches. This was a very impressive roster. Just in the past few days, the NCAA has sent a memo to all the multi-team event tournaments, all the tournaments out there for this season. And the NCAA was very clear. They said they will not allow tournaments to make NIL payments to players or to route those payments through a collective. And there are a lot of folks who say, as a result of this NCAA memo, this tournament that these very prestigious schools have signed up for is in great danger. It is worth noting that the tournament doesn't yet have a named corporate sponsor. The tournament doesn't yet have a TV deal that we're aware of. This seems like a sketchy, skeptical kind of situation. And if you're a Alabama or a Houston or these other Notre Dame, these other schools who signed up for this tournament, you may find yourself scrambling at the last minute. You may not be able to get in an MTE if this thing goes away. And I have a strong feeling it sounds like the NCAA is trying to really crack down on pay for play NIL payments. Like, it's one thing if it's a legitimate, sponsor, appearance kind of thing. But if you're paying players to play, the NCAA is not going to let that kind of thing happen. I think this tournament is in grave danger.
Yeah, and You mentioned the fact that there was no named sponsor for the tournament, what the MTE, whatever you want to call it. And I want to say that just to clarify what the tournament was saying was going to happen was they weren't going to give these teams $1 million just for showing up. They had to do specific things, and it was going to be specific meetups, meet and greets, those sort of things with this particular sponsor. The problem is that, as you mentioned, there is no sponsor. So it's kind of a, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to fill in this particular big blank later. And I think that's where the NCAA is saying, hey, the fact that it's August, late August, and you don't have a sponsor for this MTE that you swear is going to be paying $1 million per school for them to show up and do a bunch of different things outside of the basketball obligations. This is not sitting well with us, because you should probably have that by now. You should probably have, as you mentioned, you should probably have a TV partner by now. You should probably have a schedule by now, and there's none of that. And so I think this is what Duke and the other Blue Bloods were afraid of when they were being considered for this. This is different than the PK 85, right? This is deep.
There's a reason Duke and UConn and Kentucky and UNC are not in this thing.
Correct. And they probably took a look at it and said, and I think we talked about this when it was coming out. They probably took one look and said, hey, this sounds interesting. Call us back when you got some details and
right.
when you figure this thing out, and if it's cool, because we're not going to be a part of something that's going to take us all down. And they never called them back. Right. So I think the idea here is whoever's manning this tournament really has to, get their stuff together very, very quickly. Otherwise, as you mentioned, they're going to be scrambling. There's going to be a lot of teams that are scrambling. Now, sure, you would think they're not going to have an MTE, and okay, that's fine. But I know they will look at, hey, there's 8 teams in this tournament. There's at least 7 other teams that are going to need a couple extra games to play. So they'll be able to schedule some games, and maybe create an MTE out of that, or like something that we did last year, or something that we're doing kind of this year, kind of a hybrid situation. But I do think that, this tournament had talked about expanding to 16 teams next year, and then 24 teams the year after that. And this is not going to happen if they don't get this together now. You can't have 24 teams 2 years from now if you can't have 8 teams play now. It's a very simple math rule. You just can't have one without the other. So I'm curious to see how this plays out, and I wonder if they get a sponsor that comes in or is named very quickly to kind of calm the NCAA down. But the other kind of thing that I'm kind of was laughing at when you sent me this was, of course, the NCAA is going to finally show up and be like, whoa, what is this? We've only been 5 years late, guys. Like,
exactly. Ugh. All right, we're going to take a quick break here. On the other side, some football recruiting news about the Duke Blue Devils. And frankly, when it happened, blew my side. I was like, I can't believe that this just happened. Truly incredible stuff regarding Duke recruiting. That story after the break. Donald, we're back from the break. Man, I teased this a moment ago. I'm still gobsmacked. I'm trying to come up with the adjectives.
This was some fun news. I don't even know what to say about it.
It is insane. Bryce Davis, folks, you may recall, again, like 4 or 5 episodes ago, maybe a little bit more than that, I told you about this recruit, this defensive lineman who was considering Clemson, Georgia, South Carolina, and Duke. And I was like, the fact that we're even in the conversation with these schools is ridiculous. I considered it a recruiting win that Duke was one of the finalists for Bryce Davis. And when it came time for Bryce Davis to go ahead and pick up a hat and put it on his head and announce what school he was attending, he chose the Clemson Tigers. And I said, you know what? The fact that Manny Diaz got us in there, that's a win.
Fair.
Well,
there was nothing where we were like, oh man, we really lost out here. We were just like, hey, good job, good effort. He went to Clemson. He mentioned Clemson and Duke in the same sentence. We're fine. We're fine here.
Exactly. So over the weekend, the news hit me like a ton of bricks. Bryce Davis has flipped his commitment. He will not be attending Clemson. Instead, he has chosen to go play for Manny Diaz and Duke. This Bryce Davis is considered the highest rated recruit, the best recruit in modern Duke football history. Look, there may be recruits back in the Wally Wade days or something like that. Well,
I will say the thing that they were talking about was the 247 rankings, which don't go back until I think they only go back to 2007. Now, in 2005, Vince Ogabasi, who you remember him, was a 5-star recruit on the ESPN thing. But according to 247, this guy Bryce Davis is the highest recruit that has ever committed to the Duke Blue Devils in football.
I mean, it is unbelievable. He's one of the best defensive linemen, he's considered like one of the top 2 or 3 defensive linemen in the entire class. He's from Greensboro, about an hour from Durham, so he's staying close to home. As I mentioned earlier, offers Clemson, Georgia, and South Carolina were all working really hard to get this guy. And I know that Manny Diaz came to Duke with a reputation as a strong recruiter, but this is next level stuff. I can't even convey what a game changer kind of thing this is for Duke to be involved with recruits like this and to land them. And one thing I want to mention, I don't know who it is. I know it's a lot of people, but Duke is raising money. There are collectives out there that are raising money to make Duke competitive on the NIL landscape in football. And a year ago, if you had told me that Duke was going to be competitive in NIL in football, I would have said, what are you talking about? That there just wasn't enough interest at the school. There wasn't enough money surrounding the football program. I didn't think that Duke could get it done. And I'm not saying that Bryce Davis flipped his commitment because Duke offered him more money. So I don't know the money's involved. I know a lot more about basketball than football NIL. My guess is that Duke had to have a very impressive offer, but that the facilities, the coaching staff, everything Duke has to offer made a big difference in this. I don't think that Duke went out there and outbid Clemson or Georgia for this guy. I don't think that's why he changed his mind and ended up coming to Durham. He changed his mind because when he really thought about it, he said, these are the guys I want to play for. This is the team I want to play with. This is the experience I want to have. Duke offers me what I want. But again, I'm not shouting him out by name because I don't know him. But the folks who are doing Duke's NIL work in football have clearly stepped up. And this is a Duke program that is now competing for the top recruits in the country. And I did not think that was possible. Hat tip to them for pulling that off.
This is massive. And again, I'll go back to Vince Ogabasi in 2005 because that was right after I graduated. So I was, the coaches were still there. Ted Roof was still in charge. And when Vince Ogabasi committed, I remember them asking, yo, you could literally go anywhere. You were a 5-star recruit. You could go anywhere in the country. Why are you going to Duke? And he said, basically to the point was he was sold on the fact that at Alabama or at any other school that was really big at the time, he could be one of 85 5-star recruits, or he could carve his own legacy and be the first 5-star recruit at a school like Duke and start that train of good recruits coming in. Now, when you think about it, he was there and he was kind of one of the bridges between the Ted Roof era and the Coach Cutcliffe era. And so we went from a point where we were talking about, we're getting 2 stars and 3 stars, maybe a 4-star, to we were competing for mostly 3 stars and some 4 stars and not necessarily landing 5 stars, but at least competing, or at least saying we could probably go after them. The idea now, and we talked about this when Manny Diaz was hired, was the idea that Duke at one point, forget NIL, forget the facilities, forget anything. We want to be a team that competes for championships and competes for recruits, and not the recruits that are 2 stars and 3 stars. And it's no disrespect to them because some of them become really, really good. But you want to be a team that competes for 4 stars and 5 stars and lands a few of them, because that is what's going to take your team to the next level, and stop competing for the Birmingham Bowls and going for the Rose Bowls. That is what the idea is for every single program in college football that is not Georgia or not Michigan or Ohio State or those type of programs. So this is massive because this also tells everyone else in the class, hey, this guy must have seen something in Duke that precludes him and wants him to be a part of this legacy moving forward. Maybe I want to be a part of that legacy too. Maybe he shouldn't be alone in this. Maybe I can join with him, and together our class can be the rise of Duke football. That is what this brings to the table. And again, if you want to bring back all the other stuff, the NIL and the facilities and all that, that is always going to be a part of it moving forward. But the general idea that Duke wants to be a program that competes for championships and competes for the best recruits like every other school, that is going to help this program continue to rise in the way that they have. So I'm really excited about this. Of course, we have to wait until signing day for us to really be like, yes, he's part of the team, because clearly he flipped once, right? We don't want him to flip again. But I think the idea is you use him to go to continue to pursue some of the other guys in the class that maybe were a reach and now are more attainable because they go, hey, this guy right here clearly sees something. Maybe, again, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, no question about it. It's we just I'm at a loss for words that Duke should get a guy like this. And you're right, he doesn't arrive, assuming signing day goes well, he doesn't arrive for another year. But the positive vibes, the positive feeling you get about the program, about the direction Manny Diaz has it going, I mean, that's what this brings for this program. And by the way, I should tell folks, we will be along. We're not going to do it right here. In the next couple of days, we're going to give you a preview of the Duke football season, specifically our first game coming up next weekend. We're not ignoring them, but we just wanted to come on at this point and talk about the biggest recruiting win in Duke football history, or at least in the past 20 years.
Yeah, and it's a build, right? Because remember, this time, basically in December, we were talking about landing Malik Murphy, who just became named the starting quarterback for the opening game. And we were talking about.
By the way, it's really quick. It's worth noting that Bryce Davis said one of the reasons he picked Duke is he's really looking forward to coming in and playing with Malik Murphy. It's a little weird for a defensive lineman to talk about playing with the quarterback, but he sees the bright future.
Offensive defense, both sides of the ball. You need those and special teams. But I think the great thing is, again, when we got Malik Murphy, we were like, wow, this is the best recruit that has come through. I'd love to keep saying that. And I think Bryce Davis continues that tradition of, hey, he's the best recruit since. He's the best recruit since. And I hope we keep continuing to say, we just landed this guy. He's the best recruit since Bryce Davis. And I think that'd
be nice.
Again, right? That's the building block that I think Manny Diaz and the coaching staff want to build.
Yeah. And speaking of football and making football better and how important that is to the future of every program, every major college program out there, because football is the king. I wish it wasn't that way, but it just is. Our final topic on this DBR Bites episode, Donald, UConn, the current king of college basketball, two-time defending national champion. They got a coach who's turning down the Lakers to stay at their program. I mean, no one is riding higher than UConn right now. And yet, in the past couple of days, we've gotten word that UConn is talking to the Big 12, perhaps a little bit desperate to get out of the Big East and get into the Big 12. I know you have some thoughts about this. This would be another seismic shift in conference realignment. Tell me your thoughts on it.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that at least the reports that have come out about this is that UConn would move in everything but football in 2026. And then in 2031, they would join the Big 12 in football.
The idea is that they would invest, their commitment to the Big 12 is, we will invest a ton in building our football program and get it to the point where it's Big 12 ready by 2031.
Right. And they are independent right now in football because the Big East doesn't have football.
And they suck.
They're bad. And they're terrible, right? Like, thank you for Cooper Flagg, because you decided to recruit him by bringing him to a Duke UConn game at home and got mollywopped. Thank you for that. So I think the idea here is, and I was basically like, we should clown them for this, because they have talked about moving to the Big East for so long and moving back. And they're one of these teams that said we should bring back the old Big East and rebuild the Big East into this power that it was in college basketball. And now that they have won a couple national championships, they have decided that they want to leave for the greener pastures of the Big 12. And yes, on a money thing, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They're going to make way more money in the Big 12 than they ever would in the Big East, even despite how good the Big East is in basketball as a conference. But I do think that them doing this in kind of stages and continuing to establish themselves as this independent base that they can kind of build up, I think is weird. And I think it's kind of a backwards way of approaching it, because the one thing that they are terrible at that needs the improvement, as you mentioned, is football. The one thing that's going to give them eyeballs as a institution athletically is football. And that's no disrespect to their basketball team. It's the same way for us. The reason why we've spent so much money in building up our football program is because despite our basketball being the elite level that it is, that's not bringing in as much money as, a mediocre football team, right? Like that is just that's just how the world works. We don't like it on this podcast, but that's just how it is. You got to play the game that is presented to you. And I think when it comes to UConn, it feels like they're running away from that statement, that they have always been a program that said our basketball is going to beget everything else. Women's basketball, one of the best programs ever, right? Hate to say that too, but they are going to be affected by this as well, because they're not going to be playing, some of these teams that they want to. Yeah, they'll be playing a couple of better teams in the Big 12. They'll probably play the Baylors, right? Like, but I don't see how this is going to be something that benefits them anything other than financially. And the fact that football is still going to be kind of toiling away on the independent scale while this is being figured out, I don't know how that accelerates without that money, right? And without the football money, how does that accelerate the improvement of their program? Who knows? I could be wrong about all this, but I think that is the real deal here. But I think the bigger question, Jason, is that does this present another domino that could fall in conference realignment? You saw it. We had been receiving some emails and tweets from people that said that UNC was thinking about it. Now those proved to be unfounded, but the thought about UConn leaving, the thought about UNC thinking about it, the Clemson FSU lawsuits that have been dominating the ACC, just everything for the last few months, and how it's still kind of a gray cloud over the conference. The result of that is going to really tell how conference realignment is going to go. If the ACC is going to continue as a conference, they need those two teams to basically lose in that lawsuit, because if they win and they are gone, that opens the door for everyone who ever wanted to leave to do so. And then it's going to be another run on a conference, and the ACC will be the target now because the Pac-12 is gone. So this is the only thing that I'm kind of following with close eyes, is that maybe this UConn thing might start another domino. But as of right now, I think for UConn, it's hard to say that this is a beneficial thing for them other than them getting more money in their pocket.
Here's my take on this. What you're seeing here with UConn is proof of the value of major conference affiliation. That even a program like UConn that values its men's and women's basketball teams so much, clearly the greatest women's basketball program in history, one of the greats, one of the blue bloods. They've entered that. They're certainly there at this point. One of the blue blood basketball programs on the men's side. That a school like that recognizes that without being a part of a really moneyed conference, a conference that's going to bring in dollars, I suspect UConn is very worried about the future of their basketball programs. And the reason is this: if you're in one of these conferences where you're getting $30-40 million of payouts every year, mostly because of the football, you're able to use that money to pay for facilities, to pay for other stuff, scholarships, all these other kind of things. It means that you have the money to maintain your programs without worrying about what donors give. Sure, donors are going to give something, but you don't have to go out to your big pocketed donors and say, we need a new stadium, we need a new locker room, we need better training facilities. You're going to get a lot of that off of your payments from being in a big conference. And as a result, your money donors are able to spend their money on something else. They're able to spend it on players. I think it is no coincidence that we are deep into the NIL era here, or I should say shallow into it, just, a couple of years into it. And here's UConn being like, we got to get someplace where we're going to make more money. Because if we don't have more money, our donors are not going to be able to afford to buy a new stadium, to pay for a new coach, and to pay for players. Whereas at Alabama, at Kansas State, at Arkansas, at Michigan, on and on and on and on, at these other programs that are from the big conferences, they can afford to do all those things because they're getting 20, 30, 40 million extra dollars that UConn is not getting. And I think UConn recognized that even if they have to wait until 2031 to be on par with the rest of the Big 12, they were willing to do that. And Donald, it is telling. I think it is very telling that the biggest program right now, today, in college basketball, that the Big 12 is probably going to say no. Big 12 presidents don't want to bring in UConn. They're like, nah. The Big 12 commissioner tried to do the same thing with Gonzaga about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
He's banking on basketball. I love it. And the Big 12 is just crushing at that. I mean, look at bringing in Houston. This conference is killing it in the basketball arena. All the top NIL programs for basketball, it's just littered with the Big 12, way more than the ACC. They're like 3 or 4 Big 12 programs that are paying more NIL than anyone in the ACC, including Duke, including UNC. But as much as they are counting and banking on basketball, the Big 12 presidents are like, if you're not bringing football to the table, if you're Gonzaga and UConn and you're not bringing football to the table, we are not interested. That tells you how powerful football is.
I was just going to say, I was laughing as well, because if you remember, Jason, you know who's probably really mad? The Big East, because the Big East literally has been fighting to bring them back in for years. And this is, as you mentioned, kind of right. Like UConn is a school that has applied to every other conference in the country, and they have been rejected every single time. They applied to the ACC. They have beef with UConn or with BC and Syracuse. They blocked them. They have beef with Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech blocked them. They go to the SEC. The SEC was like, haha, that's funny. They go to the Big 12 twice, and the Big 12 twice took other teams. They took Central Florida before they took UConn, right?
Exactly.
So it's not like Central Florida. They had the one year that was really good at football, but like they have as good of a football program in a way as UConn has had over the last couple of years. And of course, we saw them in person a couple years ago. So this is a school that has been rejected by every major conference in the country, and yet they still continue to come and apply and say, no, for real, like give us the money. I think the idea here is UConn, as you mentioned at the top, is very desperate to try and find those funds. And they think the Big 12 might say yes now that they've kind of expanded. But I think it's also telling that the Big 12 as a whole, as of right now, is kind of saying, nah, not really. You guys can apply all you want, but you're not getting in because you don't bring the measures that we need, because you're not bringing anything that's going to help us elevate as a conference. And also, I think the one thing that a lot of people have talked about on the sly, the fact that the basketball, even on the basketball, right, as good of a program as they have been in the last few years, the fact that they play in Stores and Hartford, and you can't tell which time they're playing in which, and every day it's a different game and different thing. People hate that because the logistics of getting people to there is terrible. ESPN hates that, which is why the Big East is on Fox, because even Bristol is like, yo, we don't know where you're playing, so it doesn't matter. We're not going to show your game because we can't even, you guys move your games every 2 weeks to a different arena 55 miles away. They need to fix that too, because if the facilities are going to improve, it's one thing to play in Hartford. If you're going to play all your games in Hartford, fine. If you're going to play all your games in Stores, that's fine too. But I think the Big 12 is going to make them switch and say, hey, you're going to pick one arena. You will play in that arena. And yes, if it's a big neutral site game, quote unquote, play it in Hartford. That's fine. But every other game is going to be played right over here in Stores, because logistically, it is a nightmare to have to deal with you guys.
All right. With that, we're going to wrap it up here on the episode 57, latest edition of the Duke Basketball Roundup. DBR Bites. Donald, once again, we did a poor job. Bites are supposed to be shorter. We ended up going longer. What can I say? And, anytime we have like 3 or 4 topics, I should just know automatically it's going to take us a while.
We had some thoughts.
Yeah, we're having fun. We got thoughts. We got things to say. For Donald, I'm Jason. that wraps it up. Like we said, in just the next couple days, we'll be back at you to talk about Duke football as the season is ready to start. You know what, Donald? The one thing I feel bad about, we don't really have time to clown Florida State, the Seminoles, who spent all summer saying they're better than the ACC. They want to flee, and then they went out and got themselves beat by Georgia Tech in their opening game over in Ireland.
I believe since they have decided that they wanted to leave the ACC, they are 30-28 in the ACC. So just putting that out there. Shout out Georgia Tech for a win in Dublin. Aviva Stadium, one of the greatest stadiums in the world. Hopefully everyone gets a chance to live and get to go to see that. But that was really cool. But yes, we will talk about that more when we preview the football, because I think we have to expand on that.
Yes. And by the way, congrats to the Florida State Seminoles for being the first team in ACC history to be in 17th place in the standings. Oh, for Donald, I'm Jason. Here's the Duke band. The plan is out and taking us home.